Welcome to the session called Leveling Up Your Co-Regulation Skills. My name is Lindsay McMurphy. I'm a staff developer as part of the training and consultation team at the Lincoln Intermediate Unit 12. You can find my contact information on this slide. I'm a speech language pathologist by training, and over the years in education, I've supported autistic support classrooms, life skills, MDS, and students in the regular education setting. We have one session outcome for our time together. Identify co-regulation strategies that match a student's needs in different situations. First, a quick review. Behavior is often the outward expression of what the brain and the nervous system are experiencing internally. Basically, it goes, the brain takes in information, the nervous system responds, and then on the outside, we see the behavior. The goal overall is not to necessarily address the behavior specifically, but to support regulation. By supporting regulation in students, we will promote the behavior that will help them succeed in the classroom. Many of us have experienced the following situations. A strategy that worked to regulate the student yesterday isn't working today. Or a strategy that works for one student doesn't work for another student. Why is this? It's because co-regulation is responsive and not scripted. We co-regulate students based on the signs that they're giving us in the moment. We can't use what happened yesterday today necessarily because today's situation might be different than the situation yesterday. To make decisions about what co-regulation strategies might work in the moment, we can use this framework, which includes asking 3 questions. The first question is, what do I notice? What's the behavior that I'm seeing? The second question is, what might the student need? That has to do with the student's nervous system. If the student's running too fast or if the student's shutting down. And the final question is, what can I do? What is the co-regulation support I can provide to the student to help re-regulate their nervous system? Let's start at the beginning with step 1. What do I notice? We want to observe the student before responding. We want to get curious about what's happening in the moment and what the student might be needing. But to do that, we need to observe. If we jump immediately to responding, we might miss some crucial information that might guide us into supporting the student. Behavior is going to give us information, but it's not going to give us the whole story. That's important because not only do we want to use the information that we can see from the student, but we want to get curious about the underlying factors. The outward behaviors that we might see include arguing, pacing or eloping, refusal, crying, shutting down, or avoiding. As I said earlier, the observable behaviors are only one piece of the puzzle. We want to look beyond student behaviors because student behaviors can look similar while the students need very different supports. Consider this example. 2 students in the classroom are refusing to work. Student A is overwhelmed, while student B is anxious. We see the same behavior, the work refusal, but the needs are really different. How we support an overwhelmed student may be different from how we support an anxious student. Step 2 is asking ourselves, what might the student need? We're going to consider the nervous system here. If the student is dysregulated, their nervous system might be hitting the gas and going really fast in that moment, or it could be hitting the brake and slowing down, almost looking like a shutdown. So we want to shift from asking what's wrong with the student to what might help the student. If the nervous system's running fast, we might consider options to help slow that nervous system down. If the nervous system's shutting down, we might consider how to activate the nervous system and get that nervous system running a little bit quicker. Some possible needs here might be the need for safety, to connect with the people around them, to have a predictable environment, to get some movement opportunity, having the demands reduced, or having time to process what's going on. Let's take a moment to reflect. Think of a student who frequently struggles during the school day. What behaviors do you notice in that student? What might those behaviors be communicating? And what supports can we use to slow down or speed up the nervous system? Pause the video here and consider the answers to these questions. The final question in the process is, what can I do? We want to try to match the support we choose to the need that the student is demonstrating. Remember, effective co-regulation is responsive. So instead of going to your favorite strategy because it's easy for you, we might want to try what support fits this moment. One strategy isn't going to work in all cases. When choosing a support, we want to consider, how will the support affect the felt safety for the student? We want to consider the environment. Not all supports are possible in all environments. If you're in a tight space, you may not be able to provide movement to the student, for example. We also want to consider timing, the relationship that you have with the student, and student preferences. Let's talk about some strategies. We're going to break them down into a couple of categories. Our first category is relational supports. These supports are helpful when students feel unsafe, when emotions are escalated, and when there is a disconnect between the student and the person supporting them. Some examples of relational supports include using a soft, supportive tone of voice. Validating emotions can be really effective for our students. Saying something like, "I see that you're frustrated right now," or "I know this is really important to you." Another effective relational support includes using playfulness or humor, using connection before we provide correction, and using nonverbal reassurance through gestures or using our proximity to provide support to the student. Remember, our state of regulation as the adult support is going to drive the student's state of regulation. We want to keep a calm, steady presence for the student. Consider the following relational supports. What is one relational support that you use or comes naturally to you? What's one relational support you would like to work on? The second strategy category is environmental supports. These supports are helpful when students need predictability, when transitions are difficult, and when there is sensory overload. Some examples of environmental supports include visuals, especially using gestures, putting structured routines into place, reducing noise, Changing location to somewhere where there might not be as much noise or as much visual stimulus, and providing different sensory experiences, which basically is grounding through visual or tactile input. Thinking about the examples of environmental supports, what's one environmental support that you use or comes naturally to you? What is one environmental support you would like to try or work on? Our last strategy category is in the moment supports. These are helpful when students need regulation support immediately. Some examples of this might be movement breaks, offering choices, extending wait time, chunking a big task into smaller pieces, and providing brief breaks for the student. Remember, any of these supports are going to be more successful when you use them in the context of your grounding relationship with the student. We want to take the pressure off and provide supports. Let's compare some strategies. Different needs call for different supports. The chart on this slide shows some different student needs and the possible support category you may consider for supporting that student need. Pause the slide here and read through the chart. Now that we've talked about the strategy categories, let's talk about when to use strategies. Co-regulation is going to happen before, during, and after challenges. It's not just something we do when a student is struggling. There's a prevention piece and a reflection piece to challenges as well. Before a challenge happens, we can put those preventative supports into place. We co-regulate before challenges by having routines, using visuals and practicing with them, and building that relationship, that experience of shared joy between two people. During a challenge, we want to consider which supports are going to be responsive. Those are validating feelings, using movement, reducing the language load, and offering the student choices. After a challenge, we want to consider reflective supports. Those supports are things like problem solving, being able to look back at what the problem was and what happened afterward. We also want to consider repairing relationships, especially with peers, but also between the adults and the student who was struggling. Repairing a relationship after a moment of disagreement or discord is one of the most important aspects of co-regulation. And finally, we can consider identifying helpful strategies with the student, reflecting on what the challenge was and the supports that were provided will give us an opportunity to determine what was helpful that we might want to consider going to first next time and what was less helpful. We don't necessarily want to avoid the less helpful strategies because they might be successful sometime in the future, but it'll help us know which might be the strategies to start with and which we might want to put on the back burner for later. Let's talk about some common strategy traps. The first one is using the same strategy for every student. We know that not all strategies will work for every student because their nervous systems are different and their brains are different and their experiences are different. We fix this by being willing to try new strategies. They may not work at first, and that's okay. When we're trying co-regulation strategies, we're not looking for the thing that works the first time. That's what being responsive is all about. We're taking in information that the student is giving us and we're responding in real time. We're being flexible in real time as the student's needs change. Trap two, using the same strategy with the same student every time. We know that student needs and nervous systems change, sometimes within minutes. Stay flexible with your strategies. That way you can continue to be responsive. And trap number three, assuming behavior tells the whole story. The fix here is wait, watch, and wonder. Be curious about what's driving the behavior so that you can gather all the information you can about the student and provide the most appropriate support. We want to know what's underneath the behavior, driving the behavior, and that's what we want to address, not the surface level behavior. When we try a strategy that doesn't work with a student, we want to get curious. Did I identify the need correctly? Is the environment contributing to the problem? Perhaps I tried a strategy that was very student focused, but didn't realize what the auditory and the visual stimulation in the room was doing to escalate the student. We also want to get curious about if the student needs something different right now. Again, something that worked yesterday might not be the thing that works today. And we might want to consider a different category of support. Maybe we are trying some environmental supports, but what the student really needs is a sense of safety through a relational support. Remember, just because a strategy didn't work doesn't mean you failed. It may simply mean that the student needs have changed. We want to keep going, keep staying responsive, and keep being curious. Let's walk through a scenario together. Consider this scenario. A student repeatedly tries to get out of work by asking to get a drink or go to the bathroom or see the nurse. Or maybe they just keep getting up and walking away from the table. We're going to use the three questions or the three steps as a guide. The first part is, what do I notice? In this case, we can see that the student is avoiding an academic task. And we may also notice that it's occurring during a specific activity. Maybe it's always during math, or maybe it's always during independent work. The student may also appear to have a certain affect. Maybe they look worried. Maybe they look disengaged or uncomfortable or frustrated. Here, remember, we're observing the behavior and not assuming the motive. The second part is, what might the student need? They might need to be supported in reducing the overwhelm if the work looks too difficult or feels too difficult. The student may also need reassurance if they're feeling anxious or unsure, or maybe they feel like they've already failed before they've begun the task. Also consider a break, connection with a trusted adult, or supporting the work somehow. Remember that there could be multiple needs that explain the behavior that we're observing. And finally, we want to ask, what can I do in this situation? We want to consider possible co-regulation supports. First, I always recommend to get curious. We want to approach with curiosity instead of correction, making a statement like, "This seems especially hard today." We can offer reassurance and support. This might look like, let's look at the first problem together. This offers an on-ramp for the student where they're not alone. You're supporting them as a partner. We might consider breaking the task down into smaller steps. or providing a brief movement or regulation break if appropriate. The student may also benefit from a check for understanding if they're not sure of the directions. Remember, the goal isn't simply to stop trying to get out of work. The goal is to understand what support is going to help the student engage more successfully in the learning. Let's consider the following scenario. A student begins arguing loudly during independent work after a schedule change. We're going to use the 3 steps as a guide. Question 1, what do I notice? Question 2, what might the student need? And question 3, what can I do? Pause the video here and answer the questions. On this slide, we'll see some responses to the questions. We may have noticed that this student is arguing and using a raised voice. The student might need some predictability because of the schedule change, some reassurance because of the schedule change, and to reconnect with the people around them. When a student starts arguing, that puts a disconnect between the student and the people around them. So we can support the student in reconnecting. What can I do? First, we can acknowledge that there was a change, and we can validate the student's emotions with a statement like, I know that this was really difficult, or I know that this feels scary. We want to provide information about the schedule change. We may want to offer choices to re-engage the student and then reducing verbal demands. We can do that by using gestures. The answers that I provided here aren't necessarily the only answers, and they're not necessarily the correct answers, but these are some possible options. When you're in the moment with the student, you can use the context around the student and what you already know about the student to generate more accurate answers to these questions. Let's review some key takeaways from this session. The first one is that effective co-regulation starts with observation. Remember that behavior provides information about a student's experience, but looking beyond the behavior to what's driving that behavior helps us respond more effectively. Next, the student needs should guide our response. Similar behaviors may have different underlying needs. There's no one-size-fits-all co-regulation strategy. The context matters. The environment, timing, and situation will influence what support will be most helpful in that moment. A strategy that works in one setting may not work in another. And finally, co-regulation is responsive, not scripted. Stay curious, stay flexible, wait, watch, and wonder. Adjust the supports based on what the students need in the moment. And remember, you don't have to be right the first time. That's okay. The goal is to continue adjusting until you find the best support for the student. Thanks for joining me for this presentation to level up your co-regulation skills. My contact information is on this slide, and you can reach out to me anytime with questions.